Millar with America's Bureau of Investigation, Loving Intervention of Children, and United for Justice as co-sponsors of Loving Intervention. I'm sorry, I'm so frustrated right now because we lost 5 precious minutes to 6 minutes. But we are broadcasting where angels fear to tread. And so I'm going to give you the background. I just announced to my audience, since we weren't recording on our guests, we have 2 guests tonight. So I want to welcome Lenore Batusowicz and Melinda Kula, both in New Jersey. Welcome, ladies.
Welcome. Thank you, Douglas.
Now, folks, I need to give you a little background so you understand why I have become a expert on violent crimes against children covered up by law enforcement. Been doing 21 years this April in over 20 states. And the bottom line is I've had the privilege of working with many of the top investigators, attorneys, and child advocates in the nation. And I've never charged my investigations, and here's why. When I learned what was going on here in Santa Rosa, California, it was actually April of 1992, and I realized, my God, Lord, have you just shown me the Achilles heel of the New World Order? Violent crimes against children covered up by law enforcement? And it was because of the fact that I had met with a family who their little precious daughter at age 4.5 had been sexually abused on the University of California Santa Cruz campus. There were 60 children abused at the daycare and in housing for families. 100 parents got together at one time and they couldn't get any justice. They were forced off the campus one by one with financial bribes as well as threats, intimidation, or whatever the campus had to do. The man who was in charge of that campus paid whatever it took to get rid of these 100 plus parents for these 60 children. Now, for background on what happened and how I learned about violent crimes against children, in 1960, Kay Meyerhoff, Meyerhoff, were married on June 25th. She was 18, I was 23. And she got an excellent job because she was a beautiful young lady, red hair, and she was a receptionist for RCA. And they would just occupy a new 2-story building to take over a military surveillance project all over Alaska, protecting Alaska at that time from a potential Soviet invasion. And she started reading a book, and then she'd come home and tell me what she read over lunch hour. And so over the period of the next 2 weeks or so, she gave me this book review. And the book, I'm sure you all, at least most of you will recognize the name, Sybil, Sypil, and of course it came out as a movie a few years later. And Sybil, according to her therapist, had over a dozen altered personalities because her mother had been such an abusive person, used her in child prostitution. And so after going through this book and educating me, I'd never even heard of altered personality, multiple personality, or what they call today professionally dissociative identity disorder. And so the result was that when she got done with this, educating me about what was going on, I had almost 2 years of college. She said, Doug, I think I have the same problem that Sybil has. I was so shocked that I think I had married a multiple personality. That, to be honest with you, I went impotent, and I had to go to a therapist, a psychiatrist, and ask for some help. And he said, well, now you told me what's going on. Please invite your wife to come in next time. I asked her to come in with me the second time. She said, Doug, I cannot deal with what I've been through. I cannot talk about it to anybody. Please go and get some help for you so you can help me. Well, that obviously doesn't work that way. But, so, bottom line is we were married, a very stormy marriage for almost 16 years, had 3 beautiful children, and we would vacation 6 weeks a year, 2 vacations out of Alaska. We had a very affluent lifestyle. So with that background now, I want to ask Lenore Matuszewicz to discuss just very briefly why we're doing this show tonight, 9 days after a shootout in Delaware. And then we're going to go back into the history of what has happened over the last 10 years that we know about with this lady with multiple personalities. Lenore, would you please share what's been a big burden on your heart for the last 10 plus years?
Well, Doug, there was a tragedy in Delaware last week. People died. People were wounded. And those of us that are left are trying to make sense of it all. Portions of...
just want to clarify this. You're saying that 3 people died, plus 2 were wounded
Right.
in a shootout, correct?
Right.
Okay. Please continue.
Portions of the story are already on the website JonBenet's TrueCaseHistory.com. That's John Benet's with an S. And if you hit the tab, A Grandmother's Impossible Choice, you'll be able to find a lot of what we went through.
And who wrote that report?
I did.
Yes.
In order to... Okay.
Please continue.
In order to explain what caused the pain everyone is feeling, first, I'm going to attempt to tell you about David, my son, and Christine, his wife, my daughter-in-law. When they became one, David discovered his wife, Christine, had been seeing a psychologist for several years.
Excuse me, Lenore.
I'm sorry?
Let me set the stage here by asking you, what was your son's professional background, and was he successful, and what city and state? And we'll give it a little background here, okay?
David was an optometrist in Newark, Delaware. Was he successful? He bought a practice for about $300,000 plus or minus. And when he sold it, it was estimated that it was worth over $1.5 million. So he was successful.
Of course.
Okay. We found out from Christine that a family member had molested her. She had been prescribed a variety of mind-altering drugs in order to help her. As a loving wife, Chris gave David 3 beautiful daughters and entrusted him with the care of her first child from her previous marriage. It wouldn't be long before family members came to know the 10-year-old personality that I call Chrissy, and the very wounded Christine, who wanted to destroy her husband, David, who looked a lot like the person she said molested her when she was younger. This personality, Christine, made a phone call to a family member and stated in no uncertain terms, "I'm going to take David's business away. I'm going to take his children, his money, and by the time I get finished with him, he'll be in prison and never get out." Christine was then asked, "What do you hope to gain? And have you given any thought as to what this will do to your children?" Her reply was, "I love my first husband, but he has no money. This one has money, but I don't love him. When he's in jail, I'll have both, the man I love and money." During Christine's years of marriage to David, she continued to have a positive relationship with her first husband. The child from the first marriage was the excuse for this relationship, for Christine and her ex-husband to maintain a very comfortable relationship. At one point...
How old were the 3 daughters when this big problem first surfaced, but multiple personalities.
How old were they?
They weren't born yet.
Okay.
They weren't born yet. Christine, oh no, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The oldest was just born, maybe a couple of months. And her daughter from her first marriage would have been about 7.
What happened? How did you find out that Christine had all her personalities?
I witnessed them. I met them. Okay? At one point,
Okay, please continue.
At one point, it was necessary for my husband and me to move in with David, Christine, and the children. We began to notice the various personalities of our daughter-in-law, troubling situations that raised red flags to my husband and me. When my first natural granddaughter was 1.5 years old, Christine allowed her 8-year-old daughter from her first marriage to kneel on the child's back and twist the baby's arm up behind her. Mother appeared not to see or hear what was going on at her feet, while the baby screamed and bellowed for help. I saw Chrissy, the 10-year-old personality, throwing food on the filthy rug for their toddler to pick up and eat. At the same time, Chrissy let the mud-spattered dog in. When I yelled, "What are you doing?" the 10-year-old child, with her hand in the cookie jar, said, "This is the only way I can get her to eat." Another red flag appeared when we went to a market that sold food inside and garden products outside. Chrissy left her and David's 3 or 4-month-old youngest child in a shopping cart close to the outside entry. David called to say, "We're ready to leave." When Chrissy appeared, David said, "Where's Karen?" Chrissy said, "Who's Karen?" The Christine personality, who had been violated as a child, appeared when she returned my 3 grandchildren after a court-appointed visit. She offhandedly said, "When I sell David's 3 blonde white American girls, I'm going to get $50,000 each, and they'll never be found because of my connections to the local crime family." But Christine had 4 children. In trying to help by changing the sheets, I discovered a rap sheet, a police report describing a convicted pedophile. I wondered, was this the pedophile she was talking about who agreed to purchase my 3 grandchildren? After Chris took only my oldest granddaughter for a visit, the child developed what appeared to be diaper rash. After washing her, I had her spread her legs so that I could be sure to completely cover the area with Desitin ointment for diaper rash. I saw the child's torn hymen, the covering of her vagina. I thought she'd been exploring her body until the approximately 5-year-old said, "I didn't like playing lick the lollipop when we first started, but it's okay now." She wouldn't say anything more, no matter how much I tried to get her to say something. I thought all of these red flags had been presented to my son by me or my husband. David's position was very clear. "I love my wife. I believe we can get her the help she needs." He did not want any harm to come to the mother of his 3 children. But we have to get the children to safety. We've been asked time and again why we didn't tell. I'm not sure anyone will understand. First, when David married Christine, they made Christine my daughter, and a mother's love is unconditional. David loved Christine, and so did I. David wanted to teach Christine the skills she needed to become a good mother. He knew Christine hated her alcoholic mother, and didn't have positive training in handling children. He wanted her to know the joys of motherhood as he knew the joys of fatherhood. Secondly, I didn't and don't trust anyone in authority, not psychologists or psychiatrists. My nephew was treated with LSD for attention deficit disorder when he was very young. He's dead. Christine had many, many problems still, even after being treated by a psychologist for several years. She'd been given Xanax, she tried Lexapro, she was given Wellbutrin and Paxil to help. I think she was misunderstood, misdiagnosed. Not doctors. My son Michael was misdiagnosed with chronic appendicitis and given Tylenol and codeine. He had lymphoma. My father went undiagnosed for years until we discovered he had been given blood tainted with HIV. 2 doctors in an emergency room didn't know what was wrong with me. When I was writhing in excruciating pain on a gurney, an 80-year-old doctor walked in and said, "What are you doing for her kidney stones?" Not Child Protective Services. I had reported that a 6-year-old girl had fresh wounds over the scars crisscrossing her back, and the school nurse reported it to DIFAS, the Division of Youth and Family Services. The child was returned to the abusive parent shortly thereafter. When I rescued a little boy in my neighborhood in Millville, New Jersey, from spending the night in the snow, huddled next to a trash can, my neighbor called DIFAS. The abusive parent said, "I'm taking him to Florida." And I never heard from him again. News reports in the paper and on TV said there was a shortage of Child Protective Services workers, and the horrendous things that children in their care endured were described. Not police. The man who eventually became my brother-in-law told my uncle stories about abuse and mistakes that he'd witnessed or heard about. My husband, when he was a policeman, told me about mistakes made while he was on the force. Not his mistakes, but he described them. Then came Rodney King's beatings on TV. Not judges. A judge known to be hard on drug dealers had marijuana plants growing in red clay pots between the hedges surrounding his patio. Other judges were reportedly very lenient with family and friends. Not teachers. I was a teacher, but I had been discriminated against in school because I was a girl. Whom could I trust to take good care of my granddaughters and Christine? My answer? Only my family. Is there anyone in Delaware now that I and my family can trust besides my 2 friends, Linda and Carl? Is there? What do you think? Thank you.
Melinda,
Yes, sir.
okay, I would say this is a very hard hour to discuss, and so please continue and help her through this right now, and she can always come back on when she feels like it, okay?
We're talking now, and we're talking very plainly and simply about the Delaware shooting, the Delaware Courthouse shooting, and what led up to that horrible situation where there was loss of life. And this is what led up to it. If you go to John Benet's, with an S, truecasehistory.com, the tab, A Grandmother's Impossible Choice, you're going to see what has been available to these authorities for over 4 years. But this is a situation, a horrible situation that has been unfolding for over 10 years. Help was requested. This family's looking for help. But from the very get-go, please understand, David, Christine's husband, absolutely loved his wife and would not permit anyone for any reason whatsoever to go against her. So if when the courts brought David and Christine before the judge to start determining divorce proceedings and all that followed, and was there abuse of the children, David was ordered by the courts, as was Christine, to go and visit the court's psychiatrist to be examined, to make a clear, unbiased determination as to who is the better parent, what's going on with these children, and what's going on in this home. David was more than happy. David visited with the court-appointed psychiatrist. David, when he was finished, when he answered all the questions and then some, the psychiatrist, appointed by the courts, who did not know David, said, I have the wrong person in front of me. I've heard what you had to say. I have my own feelings about what is really going on here. We really need to talk to Christine. He said, in my opinion, you're the one who should be having the children, and she is the one who needs psychiatric care. So he expressed to the judge that we need desperately to see Christine, as was ordered by David, to please visit with the psychiatrist. And he did. Christine was asked to once again, a second time by the courts, and Christine chose not to see the psychiatrist. She chose not to do what the court ordered her to do. So that just created a bigger problem for the family, for the children, for David, and actually for Christine as well. That began the prejudice against David as a father in what I have now come to know as Delaware, the mommy state. Christine had many other responsibilities to the court in reference to the welfare of the children. David was always made to jump through hoops. Christine was not. That leads us to them, the family. David, his mother, and his father coming to our home, visiting us on Thursday evening, staying overnight on Friday and Saturday. Sunday, they needed to be in Delaware courts. They had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday. We had heard on all the news stations that the weather was coming in with snow and some rain, and it was going to get very, very cold and icy. That prompted this family to make a very wise decision to stay within a half hour of the Delaware court Sunday night so that they would not be late for court on such an important gathering before the judge. David looked forward to going before the judge because not only was he going to have the opportunity to explain to his honor that if I am making $5 per month because I'm incarcerated, and you know this because you're the one that incarcerated me, so we're talking about a 4-year period at $5 per month, how then can you expect me to pay based on an optometrist income? I hadn't been an optometrist for 4 years. My ex-wife saw to that, and so did you. So this is not reasonable. He was hoping to plainly state these facts. And while he was before the judge, David was filled with hope that his honor would revisit the possibility, remote as it may have been, there was still a glimmer of hope that his honor would allow him to speak to the children, or at least speak to Christine. Hopefully over the years she has softened, and maybe she's willing to simply tell him the welfare of the children. How are each of his daughters doing? Do they need anything? That sort of conversation. And maybe convince her to revisit the possibility of seeing his children, even if it meant that someone needed to be there in the interim. So he's filled with hope. He goes to the courtroom. He passes security. His mother is not with him because she is at the family, who is only 1/2 hour away from court, versus my home, which is 2.5 hours away in the best of conditions. And there would have, I'm sorry?
Wait, question. I'm curious, Loaded, we fast forward here over a 10-year period. How could a man who is worth, his business was worth $1.5 million, obviously he had a home for his family. It was obviously a valuable home. Obviously he had some money in the bank. How could he go from being a wealthy millionaire to $5 a month? What happened to all his money?
We're going to
Okay.
have his mother explain that.
Yes.
When the decision was made to remove the children and take them to South America or to Central America, David sold his practice, his $1.5 million practice, for somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000. He made the mistake of investing it in a bank, a so-called bank, someplace in Australia. He can't get that money back. The rest of his money was spent on a motorhome to take us all to safety.
What was the value of this motorhome, as I recall? Was that 33 feet long?
It was a 33-foot Winnebago Vista with two slide outs, one where the kitchen was and one where the bedroom was. And whatever he had left, including my retirement fund, we used to flee and to live on.
Okay, but
Then-
my question is, what's the value of the motorhome? How much did he pay for it?
It was about 80,000 or thereabouts, 82,000, something like that.
Thank you.
Then when we got picked up, we were taken to, each of us taken to prisons. And
By who?
we got picked up by the United States Marshal Service in Nicaragua. And we both went to prisons in Florida and then eventually transferred to Delaware. David, when he was in prison in Delaware, his attorney couldn't reach him. They were not allowed to see him. So his attorney went, and I don't know if he petitioned the court or whomever, but he was transferred to Woodstown in New Jersey. I went to Baylor for a year and a half, and David went into the prison system, the federal prison system. He was incarcerated in Bastrop in Texas. And as I said, he made $5 a month working in the kitchens. So he couldn't pay about $2,200 a month child support. If he could have, that would have been great. I mean, anybody that could pay $22,000 when they're only making $5 had to be a genius or a wizard.
Well, you said 22,000. You mean 2,200
I'm sorry,
a month?
2,200
Right.
a month.
Which, of course, is over 26,000 a year. Obviously, Christine has the best of both worlds, according to her, all of her personality.
Yes, sir.
Because now she could actually remarry the man she loved and had the first girl with, and of the four daughters, and obviously they could live very well on $2,200 a month. So I want to ask another question.
Go ahead.
Okay, and that is very important. So, why did he feel so desperate that he had to flee the country with his daughters, number one, but more important than that, why would the state, I'll give you an example. Here in California, I had good friend I've been working with for the last 19 and a half years. I'm sorry, 20 and a half years. I've been working with him. I was referred to him by the former head of the FBI for Los Angeles, Ted Gunderson. And Ted Gunderson was a co-founder of United for Justice. I spoke at 7 different states at national and regional conferences. Although we spoke separately, we didn't speak at the same time. And also we had a situation where we were working with John DeCamp. There was the book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska, exposing a nationwide network of pedophiles working with Satanists. And so the 3 of us, DeCamp, Gunderson, and myself, of course, they were the first 2 people I contacted to see if we're going to continue doing the same thing for the next 18, 19 years by beating our heads against the wall, or we're going to change our strategy. So they've been doing it longer than I had, exposing these pedophiles, and the NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which has, according to the camp in his book, 22,000 members. And think about it, promoting pedophilia, and yet we never read about a member of the NAMBLA, or we never hear about a member of female pedophiles being arrested in America. And I accepted this for now for 21 years this April. So we have to wonder why, if California back in 1993, the posted bail for a family dispute, we have one of the parents fighting with the other parent, and so the one parent flees the city, the state, whatever, with their son or daughter, and not disclosing where they're going and when they'll be back, and no communication. Why is the bail only $5,000 to $10,000, and under very extenuating circumstances, $20,000? And yet, that was the posted bail in our county, in the district attorney's office. Why and so I would say it's not considered a very important crime. In fact, it's just a dispute. So can you give us any idea of why the U.S. Marshals and the FBI would be so concerned about your 3 granddaughters traveling to Central America with their father and their grandmother, that you 2 were put in prison, state prison with you for a year and a half, and of course, Dr. David in federal prison for 4 years. Any idea why they came down so hard on you and Dr. David?
Because they could.
But you had no money. So there had to be a reason that they were so harsh with you when they're so lax with most parental abductions.
I think it's up to the judge, and in this case, I don't know, maybe they wanted to make an example.
Okay.
I really don't know, Douglas, I really don't know.
And as I recall, though, because of Dr. David's decision not to expose his wife's pedophilia with the little girls and the oral sex and all that stuff with the little girls, the judge and the district attorney and the U.S. attorney and the federal judge, they didn't even know these kind of things that are now on Melinda's website, correct?
Well, Douglas, what happened was, in my situation, I was told that I wasn't allowed to say anything about that. Not in court, not to the judge. They said, don't
Who told you
tell. The lawyer that I had was Demetrio Duarte from Texas. He said, if you say anything about the abuse that Christine fostered upon her children, David's going to get off worse in his Supreme Court trial. They told David,
Wait, you said Supreme Court trial.
right.
He was in a federal district court. He was not before the Supreme Court.
They called it Supreme Court in Delaware.
I thought you said it was a federal trial. Now you're talking about a state trial.
I'm not sure exactly how that works. The judge was Gregory Sleet. My understanding was he was federal because there was fraud involved. In order to keep Christine from following us, David borrowed money from his bank and sent it to Canada. The money was returned, but according to the person that did the pre-trial sentencing or investigation or whatever it's called, they said that over $200,000 was still outstanding. And when the judge saw that, he gave David 4 years and 5 years probation.
But that money was not outstanding.
Really sad, the folks. You didn't understand that. What would you have done if your child was being molested by your spouse and having oral sex with your spouse, either male or female, or your granddaughters were being sexually abused and having forced to have oral sex with either your son-in-law or your father-in-law? It's a desperate situation, and I admire Dr. David and Lenore for having the courage to try to protect these precious little girls. And how old were the girls? Let's just review this again. It's so important. How old were the girls when it was decided that you needed to flee with them and risk prison for both of you by doing so?
Around 5, 4, and 2.
Okay. And have you covered the fact that what your 5-year-old granddaughter told you about Mommy Dearest?
One of the things she said after we got her to talk, she said that Mommy taught them all about the G-spot when they were in the bathtub. I'm not sure who exactly she was talking about besides herself. Maybe her older sister. I don't think it was the younger sisters. And then she said, I have to do things to Mommy. It's a big secret. If I ever tell, Mommy's going to be in trouble. I don't want my Mommy to go to jail. What would you think she meant? I didn't think it was anything good.
And what she also made another statement at a different time about a lollipop. Please express that.
Oh, I already spoke about that. It was
Okay.
when I saw her torn.
Because I had to leave the room temporarily, and so I missed that. So please continue then.
Repeat that.
Okay, what she had said was, well, she had a rash between her legs from her mons all the way back to her butt cheeks. I took her upstairs, I washed her, and I had her spread her legs so that I could be sure that I had every square inch of her covered with Desitin ointment for diaper rash. When she spread her legs, I saw the torn hymen. And I thought at first that Laura had been finding and exploring the different parts of her body. Maybe she put her fingers up there. Maybe that's how it got torn. But then Laura said, I didn't like playing Lick the Lollipop when we first started, but it's okay now. And after that, when she realized I didn't know how to play that game, she clammed up. She shut up. She would not say another word. So I had to continue to investigate, find out if she was being molested, who was doing the molesting. I had to stop it. I had to stop it. As a young child, Douglas, I had been molested. I was about 5, and I swore my children would never have that experience. I never thought that I'd have to include my grandchildren.
Douglas, there's something else that needs to be said here in reference to motive by the Delaware authorities. My husband and I needed to be in court. We had to be there this past Friday. The reason for that was simply to agree to have David in our home, which we were more than happy to, along with our children, until the trial had been concluded. I did not realize that you needed a photo ID. So when I tried to get through security, he said, you need a photo ID. And I said, I have been in court many times for other individuals in New Jersey under the cover of Unite for Justice, New Jersey Advocate, never needed one. I have been in Chicago many times for other individuals under the same cover, Unite for Justice, New Jersey Advocate, spilling over into Illinois, and I never needed one. Why do I need one now? And he said, because in Delaware, we do things differently. He would not let me pass. Did not realize what a blessing that was, because then I was escorted to the Federal Public Defender's office. I sat quietly in that office. I was able to hear everything that was going on in the offices. There was only a small thin wall dividing us. There was a door where I was seated, but on the other opposite end of the, I guess, offices, there was a second escape door so that people could leave, the employees or the public defenders could leave without having to go to the reception area. So here I sit quietly. A very short, stout gentleman came in. His name was Carl. He ignored me. He went into the office. As he's in the office, he's talking to one of the young ladies. All the other ladies left very quickly for lunch when this man entered. He had a rough personality. One of the things that he said, and I tell you, I heard it as clear as you can imagine. Discrimination hasn't changed much. It's still going on. The prosecution of these white people will look good to the public. Wilmington, Delaware is primarily a black area. And this is his comment. That day, and at that moment, as a matter of fact, the public defenders, the team, they're in court. This man used his key to get into that part of the building. That tells me he's either a public defender or an employee on some level with the Federal Public Defender District of Delaware. He needed a key to get in the office. He had the key to get in the office. And this was his comment. Is this the real reason why Delaware is going after David and his mother and his sister? Simply because they need a few more white prisoners so they won't get into trouble for the number of the black African Americans, in as much as that is mostly that particular area? And if that's what's going on, can we all say reverse discrimination? What happened to the African Americans way back when and what is still going on now is not right. Was not right then, is not right now. But to try and change the scale, the balance, by simply randomly picking families and prosecuting them so that then they could look square in the eye of the public and say, we arrested so many blacks, and granted it's 90% here in Wilmington, Delaware, but now we have to arrest more white people so that we don't have problems with the population. That's wrong. That's injustice, and that's criminal. So
Well, it is. It's a question.
Yes.
you grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and please tell people about your background, because this could be taken as a, possibly you're prejudiced against black people, and I know that's not the truth, so not even a hint there. So please tell people how you were raised.
My mother and father had 7 children, 4 girls and then 3 boys. I am the second born of 7. We were fortunate enough to live in an area where my brothers and sisters in the community were either black, they were Spanish, or they were Puerto Rican. In a 6-mile radius, my mother was with her 7 children, and my father and my uncle and my grandfather. We were the only Caucasian family. The rest of our neighbors looked out for us. The males in the community, the black males in the community, the Spanish and the Puerto Ricans, they taught my mother's daughters, my sisters and I, how to jump, how to run, how to catch, anything that a male would do. They made sure we knew how to look out for ourselves, as well as become very good in sports. So am I prejudiced? Absolutely not. My father once fell off a ladder trying to get the decorations up when he was late in age and didn't want to wait for my brother. The very next day, the ladder fell and lopped off his right leg. Starting at the foot, infection caused the rest of the leg to come off later. It was a black gentleman who appeared, and I tell you, as God is my witness, he appeared out of nowhere. He took his jacket off. He covered my father's foot. He did not want my father to see how serious the injury was, because my father was in shock. He rang the doorbell. He asked my mother to please get dressed, call the ambulance first, get dressed, and come downstairs, that he was going to stay with my father, protect my father, until the ambulance came. So take your time, because he did not want my mother to fall down the steps in haste and worry. He stayed with my mother and my father, protecting my parents from seeing the tragedy of my father's leg. When the ambulance came, he whispered in their ear how bad it was. He left his coat on my father's leg. They threw a blanket over my father, lifted him up into the ambulance. My mother and my father turned to say thank you, more my mother, and he was gone. This angel, who happened to be black, simply was gone. Nobody knew where he went. Nobody knew where he came from. He was there when he was needed, and he was gone. My daughter Diana one time was very upset about something. She was in the mall. She was crying, and this is a child that never ever cries, even when she's physically wounded, but someone must have hurt her spirit by words. And as she sat on the bench, a black gentleman and his 2 small young children sat by my daughter, and he said to her, please understand something. For whatever reason you are crying, if it's about your parents, you have to know that your parents love you, and they're only trying to do right by you. If it's because someone said something, a friend or an enemy, you have to know that they're not the only ones on planet Earth who have something to say about you. Let that roll off your back like duck in water. And then we had another experience in my family where they were in trouble, and a black gentleman came to help. So trust me, I have a firm belief that we are all, every single one of us, God's children. Some of us behave, some of us don't behave, but we're all his children.
Excuse me, but how old was your daughter at this time that she was crying, and what city, county, and state?
In that particular situation, that was right here in New Jersey. That was in Toms River, New Jersey, at the Ocean County Mall. In reference to my father, that was McCook, Illinois, where that took place, that particular injury. But the other reason why I have a bone of contention with Illinois is because in Illinois, my baby brother, a Lyons, Illinois police chief at the time, stabbed my mother 63 times, while he shot my father twice in the abdomen with a full barrel shotgun. But when you are a police chief in Illinois, in Cook County, Illinois, no less, the #1 most corrupt county in these United States, you can get away with murder. Oh, but you better have a badge first, because then you can count on all of the prosecutors and the attorney generals to look the other way. Because when I went to the governor and I asked him for help, and he did not help, the governor at the time, he ended up in jail later for corruption. I waited, and then Rod was voted as the governor, and I gave him enough time to get his feet wet. I gave him the information. I was hoping he would help look into the double murder of my mother and father by a police chief, my baby brother, Daniel Babich, and he didn't help because he was on his way to jail for corruption. The current governor, this information by way of the websites, the Chicago forums, the Illinois forums, he had the information, and I made a flippant comment that I was hoping that at least this governor would look into the double murder of Walter and Dorothy Babich Sr. in McCook, Illinois, which was covered up by McCook, Illinois Police Department, as well as Lyons, Illinois Police Department, and the response from that current governor was a simple yes. Yes, I'm going to end up in jail like my two predecessors, or yes, I'm going to look into this and bring justice to your mother and father. My answer to what did he mean by that? I don't know. But my brother is still, I guess you would call him a dispatcher because he'd been demoted so many times. The police there and the village official, the president, they suspect he had something to do with the murder of my mother and father, but they chose to do nothing about it other than just basically demoting him periodically. But a retired FBI agent called me, and he read the website, JonBenet'sTrueCaseHistory.com, Shattered Shields was the tab, Babich homicide. And he said, based on the information, the complete information about my parents' case, he said, you already proved your brother murdered your mother and father by the fact that he removed all the weapons, he collected your father's gun collection in his squad car, moved them over to his home under his lock and key because he too had children. And then later, your mother and father are murdered by the very same weapons. So what did somebody do? Break into your brother, a police chief's house, steal two of the worst guns, the most worn guns, bring them to McCook, Illinois, break into that house, turn around and shoot your father twice in the abdomen, not once but twice, with a full barrel shotgun while he was sitting in his chair.
Excuse me, but we have to do a wrap up here, and I'd like to, in another minute, after making some comments, I would like to invite you to close this with prayer. And so, folks, you need to understand that having investigated violent crimes against children covered up by law enforcement in 21 states for the last 21 years, I've been shocked to learn that every place I go, Child Protective Services, by whatever name it is in your state, is covering up the violent crimes against children. And the reason is the federal government is paying for the breakup of the families. So these children are worth tens of thousands of dollars to the local bureaucrats and the law enforcement. And so that's one of the biggest reasons that you're seeing the breakup of the family nationwide, is because the family courts are paid to destroy families. And so with that, Lenore, do you have a comment before we ask for a prayer?
We're going to be
I
discussing
think-
the rest of it tomorrow.
I think we'll be discussing what happened in the court, what led up to it, what happened afterwards. The only thing I'd like to add today is if the judge in the case that Christine brought against David, the protection from abuse, the original case, if the judge had made the right decision, my husband, my daughter-in-law, her friend, they'd be alive, and those two guards wouldn't have been hurt.
Right. So, Melinda, please close the prayer.
Holy Father, please hear these words spoken by someone who is loved by many. Each time a person stands up for an idea or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, they stand for a ripple of hope for us all. That is a statement made by Robert Kennedy. And that is what we are asking you, Holy Father. Give your children, your people, the strength, the courage, and the wisdom to fight the corrupt so that betrayal of American citizens does not continue on the level that it is in these times. We beg you, we plead with you, Holy Father, in Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Folks, we urge you to all to email and call everyone on your email list. We need to have a bigger turnout tomorrow to listen to this. And of course, we'll give the Lord the honor that He deserves and His Son, Jesus Christ. And we thank you so much for Yeshua HaMashiach trying to protect little children. God bless you all, and stay tuned for another shocking report tomorrow night with more family members participating. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank you.
Douglas.
And Melinda, bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Douglas. Thank you.
Mhm.